summer is flying by. Oh my gosh. I am so glad that you're hanging out with me through this podcast because it's a great place to stay connected and to get inspired. And today you are going to be inspired with our guest, Aubrey Bursch. She runs Easy School Marketing. She has extensive experience with independent schools. And I'm telling you, the tips and tricks she's going to share are going to be helpful no matter what type of school you work with. This is tangible advice that you are going to want to take some notes on because we're talking strategy, we're talking content, we're talking not enough time, and some of the tips to help with all of those things. Aubrey is just a wealth of knowledge, and she's also got a special invitation into a free event coming up in August that could really help you in talking through some of your biggest struggles when it comes to social media for your school. So I love this interview. I feel like Aubrey and I are a little bit almost twins, me focused a little bit more on public schools and her focused on private schools, but all of the strategies, like we are totally in line. Now, she's going to talk a lot about systems. You guys, if you're looking at the new school year, and you're thinking, I need a little bit more training to get some of the systems, have you checked out our boot camps? Yes, and I said boot camps because we have two different types now. We have a social media boot camp and we have an Instagram boot camp for schools. So if you are interested, those spots are starting to fill up already. They are happening this fall. And so you can jump into either our social media bootcamp or our one that's focused just on Instagram. You can head on over to our website under services, grab all the details there, get signed up, reserve your spot because they will go fast. We can't wait to help you. Now, before we jump into today's interview with Aubrey, I want to get over to today's K-12 PR tip. All right, today's K-12 PR tip is a simple one. I want you to think about how you get content from your staff. Now that it's mid-July, how do you get content from your staff? Because going into the new year, the new school year, you're going to have to ask your staff again to keep submitting content to you. I'm telling you, you should have one main way. And the main way we do it is through an email, but it could be some other way if you want a form, if you want something else, but it should not be 5 different ways. It should not be direct message. It shouldn't be text message, shouldn't be your personal email and, special email and all of the ways, WhatsApp, whatever. How are you getting content from your staff so that you can share all of the great stories that are happening in your school? So I just want you to reflect on that. And if it's really complicated, then think about how it is for all of the staff members that are trying to submit content. You might be thinking you're making it easy by letting them do whatever works for them, but whatever works for them is going to make it more confusing for you. And so I really want you to think about how you get content to share it on your social media platforms. All right, let's get to a ton more tips with this interview with Aubrey Bursch. Hello, Aubrey. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Aubrey Bursch is our guest today from Easy School Marketing. She, the tables are flipped a little bit because usually you're doing the podcasting, right?
It is. It's really odd to be on the other side, but I'm very excited and happy to be here.
Yeah. And someone that shares a passion for helping schools with school communication. So I'd love for you to just kind of share your background and what you do, kind of your work with Easy School Marketing.
Oh, yes, sure. So I always like to say I'm a mom and a marketer. I don't know if anyone else could relate to this, but I've worked in and with independent schools for the past 15 years. I have 2 children in small independent schools. I come from a family of educators too. So my parents were, administrators and teachers in public schools. So I feel like this is kind of in my DNA, just working with schools. And I will say, like, my journey here, it was a little different. I never set out, I'm sure everyone says this, they never set out to be like a marketer or work in schools. It just kind of happened organically. And I started in schools, about 15 plus years ago. And I've done so many roles, like as heads assistant, events director, admissions coordinator, director of marketing, director of development. And really that's led me to where I am today, because I kind of see all the different roles, and I've been in them, and I've worked with everyone in schools. And so it's given me this kind of holistic view of what's really happening in schools. And I always say, like, marketing is internal and external, and it's so in everything that we do in schools. And so that's what I'm passionate about. And for Easy School Marketing, we specialize in like helping independent schools, with their development, marketing, and admissions departments. And we help them understand what they're doing well, kind of look at their return on investment on initiatives. And we try to shift their efforts so that they can reach their goal to increase enrollment, retention, and revenue. So that's basically what we do. And we absolutely love what we do here. So it's just fun. I mean, that's how jobs should be, right?
Right. Absolutely. And Aubrey, this is your company. And then do you have a team of contractors that kind of help you?
I do. I have we call ourselves a small but mighty team of
Yes.
People I adore, who are also have, experience working in independent schools and kind of get what it's like to be a parent, a community member, an administrator, all those different roles, because it is important. And sometimes when we're in a school, we kind of forget how everyone else is receiving our communications and, everything like that.
Yeah. And I know by the end of this, you're going to share your website, and you just have so many valuable tools and tips and tricks that I know you're focused on independent schools, but a lot of your information pertains to public schools, charter schools, big schools, small schools, all of them, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many tips that can be applied across those areas, because a lot of it is just looking at like what works and what doesn't, and what do you need to focus on and to get the goals, to reach your goals.
So I got a quick question. You've been in schools and marketing for about 15 years. What'd you go to school for? Did you go to college for something specific or marketing?
Yes. So I went to college for communications because I was like, I'm going to be a broadcast journalist. I'm going to travel the world. I'm going to do all these cool things, and then I got in my journalist class and I was like, yeah, I like it. And like my professors were like, you can do this. You're writing great stuff and you should go and broadcast and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. But I graduated with that, right? And I went and I delved in the world of like nonprofits and like marketing and kind of working with nonprofits. And that really fed my soul. I was like, okay, maybe I wasn't meant to be a journalist, but I really finding my passion with nonprofits. And then that led me to schools, because a lot of the schools I work with are nonprofits. And so it was kind of like that next jump. And I've always been so interested in education because of my parents' background. Like I grew up in schools, like on summer, like when my dad worked summer schools, guess who was there with him? I was. Right. Guess who was making photocopies at the main office? That was me, right? So like I always felt a connection to schools. So it just seemed like a natural transition. And so then learning the different roles at schools and independent schools, especially, and just getting to know it and figuring out where's my place? Like, how can I use my skill set to help these schools? And that's how I came to be working in like the marketing development and admissions arena here.
Okay. And I'm so excited to get into some of your best practices and all of that. But when you say that you help small independent schools, can you quantify that by enrollment numbers so that our listeners can understand that?
Sure. I think this is like that hot button question that no one ever wants to answer, because they're like, please don't put a number by it. And like, I would say it's a tough thing, because there are some schools who self-identify as small schools, even though I look at them, I'm like, you're actually a medium-sized school, right?
Right.
And so it's always like how they perceive themselves. But then if you're putting like a number by it, I would say like, for me, I think it's under 300, but it could be under 500. I mean, it depends on like the school's structure. And I always find it's also the administration, right? And the resources that they have. Because if you have a 500, student school, right? and there's just like half a person doing your marketing or something like that, then you're dealing with small school issues, right? Limited, even though you have a larger school or you're in 1,000 school. Like it depends on what resources you have, what time and time and staffing resources you have, basically.
Right. Okay. So that helps. But I think the big thing for all my listeners, which a lot of them are with public schools, since I started this business back in 2014, when did you start Easy School Marketing?
Oh gosh, like 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Time flies.
Okay, so about 2012. But independent schools obviously need to attract folks that are going to be paying tuition, but public schools, 8, 10, 12 years ago started operating similarly because of open enrollment. Many of our states, like Wisconsin, Minnesota, and other states, you can pick where you want to send your kids, and the dollars follow those kids around. And so even, with all of the tips Aubrey's going to share, and obviously a lot of her experiences with the independent schools, but I want everybody thinking about, how does this apply to my public school? Because I believe that your tips are going to apply to any kind of school that's out there, right?
Absolutely. I truly think it will, because a lot of the tips I'm going to share, it's just good best practices, good strategies that you can do to stand out in the market and to really make sure that, this is working for you too. I always think that's a key point to make.
So one of the big things that I think all schools face, but especially small schools that you work with, is small budget and a limited staff. So, this is called Mastering Social Media for Schools. So when we just break down the social media strategies, what are those strategies that are so important for schools that are small budget, limited staff?
This is so good. So I'm so glad you asked this, by the way. You're doing such a great service for schools out there. So I always say, like, when you're looking at you're limited, you have limited resources, limited staffing, you only have so many hours in the day. It's all about picking and choosing like where you want to invest that time and energy. And I think that's one. And it's two, it's like really understanding that what works for you might be different from the school down the street, because they might have different resources than you do. So you can't be sitting there comparing yourself and being like, wow, they're posting 8 times a day and they're on all the channels and stuff like that. No. Like, let's just be honest. That's not going to work for you. So I always say, like, what's sustainable for you and your organization? If you're like the one person marketing for like a big school or, a district, like, how are you going to use your time? What's sustainable? How can you be consistent and deliver the most value? Maybe it's only focusing on 2 channels, but doing them really well, right? And I also say, like, when you're looking at your resources, it's saying, how can we make the most of them? So when we're working with teams, we're saying, okay, so what's your strategy? What are your goals? How are you planning for this? Like, I'm a big proponent of setting aside time during your week, during your month, during your year, to both like create content and plan, but also like looking at, the big things that need to be done, like the higher level plan and then the weekly plan that you need to do, as well as like, when are you batching your content? I mean, before we hit record, we were talking about how important it is to batch content, right? Like, how are you going to prepare yourself for success during the school year? Because we find that people, when the school year hits, if you don't have a plan in place, you're kind of like treading water, and you're not going to reach your goals by just like treading water. You need to come up for air, like look around. Okay, what's the plan? What do we need to do? Do I have the time set aside to do it? And then moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. So this is gold. This is so good. And we're like on the same page. When we first talked, it was just like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so fun. So I think your number one thing that you shared was picking your focus and what's sustainable for you, because when you're trying to juggle so many things, you can't do anything right. And so it's all going to be kind of half, what. And it's okay to not have to compare yourself to other people. And I think especially in a world where a lot of folks are getting burnt out. I mean, it's just social media is not always easy to handle. And then if you're trying to do all the things for all the people, really what's sustainable, what can you do consistently. I think that's really good. So everybody, please take that advice, whether you're small school, big school. I mean, you kind of, and how would you say the schools should identify, okay, let's just say, Aubrey, I feel like I really can do one channel really well. Which channel should that be? What would your answer be?
Oh, I love this question because not many schools ask this question, right? I love it because, we sit in a room and we make decisions, and sometimes we don't have the data to make those decisions. And this is one of those things that I think schools should definitely ask, like your constituent base. What channels are the students on? What channels are the parents on? Like a simple survey would get that answer. So you're not spending your time on, quote unquote, there's no right or wrong channel, but like the wrong channel, the channel that's not going to get you the best return on your time investment. So I'm all about data gathering, because I think, and I would say consistent and frequent data gathering, because a lot of schools will do it once and then wait 3 years. But as you know, social media, 3 years ago, social media is not necessarily the same social media today.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely ask, but you work with a lot of schools, Aubrey. And so from your gut feel with most of the schools that you work with, what would you say is kind of maybe the top channel or the top two channels? What would you say?
Well, I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of trends right now for, at least for independent schools. And frankly, like, obviously it depends on a lot of factors, because some schools have like channels for their athletics and they have like it gets really complicated really fast.
Yes.
So obviously there's factors out there. I would say a lot of small schools are sticking with the go-tos of Facebook and Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there might be seeing some trends where they're not seeing as much engagement on Facebook, right? It depends on the age of their parents too. I mean, and it depends on how they like to engage with content. And then you have like the schools with younger parents, like what are they looking at? Well, a lot of them are on Instagram, but some are veering over to other platforms. Like, so it really isn't a simple like, oh, most of the schools are on these two platforms. I think they probably are mostly on Facebook and Instagram, but also looking at like the trends. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, and I would like to see more schools using that platform.
Yes.
I think it's a great platform to try out and to really engage, especially with alumni, but also with there's a higher income bracket up there. So for independent schools, that's important to note. So I think that's really important as well. But I think it depends on the age of the parents, and how many channels they're spread across already.
Okay. All right. Good. And I would echo that. I guess, my favorite channel to be most prevalent on for most of our schools is Facebook. And then Instagram can be so impactful for younger parents and also for student engagement, which can be important. Okay. Now I just want to go back and ask, because I think you said batching content. So we were talking about, we batch our podcasts and blogs and, things like that, where we're getting ahead of them. In social media, there's regular content that you can plan for your school, and batching is a lifesaver. Like, it is totally a lifesaver. But how would you describe what batching content is, and how would you invite some of our listeners to maybe think about that differently so that they can get a head start on making 22, 23 a more manageable year?
Absolutely. Who doesn't want a more manageable year? So what I consider batching, like when I'm working with schools or when I'm like actually at a school helping them implement things, we're looking at like, what are key points in the year where we can come in and like film children saying thank you or something for, like, let's say there's a fundraiser later in the year. Or if we're saying, okay, so our faculty are going to be during an in-service week, or they have a professional development day or something, we're going to set up our camera and just have them scheduled to come sit in front of our camera and tell us why they love this school. Like we're looking and we're saying, how can we gather it? We're sending out like a key, like, surveys to parents, asking them for testimonials at certain times of the year, and asking faculty and staff to fill those out too. So we're really gathering that data, because yes, like social media is it's a reflection of what's currently going on in the school, but it's also like, if you look at the other things that you probably want to highlight, like social proof and stuff like that, then that needs to be curated, and that can be done in advance. So I'm always saying, like, what can we gather now that's going to help us be successful in the fall? And then the fall, what can we gather in the fall that's going to help us be successful in the spring? Like, there's so many like places to batch and be able to gather all that content and data ahead of time, so we're not scrambling at the time like, oh, we need testimonials. Oh, it's time for us to showcase social proof because, this is when open houses or enrollment season is. So that would be my recommendation for all schools.
Okay. And so you can get those videos, like one day you can sit down and probably get 10 videos, and then you're going to be able to use those throughout, or maybe do, I like campaigns, or a lot of times I call them features. So if in the month of February, when it's, the month of Valentine's Day, if it's what I love about my independent school, then you've got some video already created. You're not having to go create that content fresh.
Absolutely. And think of how much, because then you control when you're going to edit those videos, right? The pockets of when your peak and valleys are in terms of your time flow, right? So it's giving you that time instead of trying to fit more than 24 hours in a day, trying to execute some of these things.
Yeah. Flying by the seat of our pants. We don't like to have to do that. So when it comes to content, regular content that schools should be sharing out on social media, what type of content is best for schools to share?
I love this. So I always say, like, for schools, really, it is, first of all, I think schools really need to understand their value, right? What are their core pillars? Like, what are they known for? What sets them apart? And this is regardless of what type of school you have. This is true. Like, what sets you apart? And then once you understand that, then it's saying, okay, so how do we showcase this throughout like our year, right? And it's identifying like posts that really speak to those core values. That really helps people who are looking at your school and maybe trying to make a decision, or just, for also current parents, right? Because you're reaffirming the value that you're providing, and helps them understand your school better. In addition, storytelling pieces are so critical. Like, what is tell me the story of this project. Tell me the story of this teacher. Tell me the story of, this child's transformation, or, from the graduate who started as in kindergarten and now is graduating from high school, and they're going off to this. Like, I want the story, right? The stories are so compelling, and people really resonate with stories and the emotion behind stories. And emotional storytelling is, I think, what is it? They say, you make a decision with emotion, back it up with logic. So I think storytelling is huge in a way that you can connect people with the emotion of what you're trying to convey. Also, I would say, obviously what's happening in the classrooms, a lot of times, we underestimate the importance of this, but it's true. Like, parents want to see what's happening in the classroom. People who are looking at your school, your community, like, what are the unique and interesting things that are going on in the life of your school? And then there's also the testimonials and the case studies, and like showing, I always say, we're always thinking about, and I mean this only in the most positive terms, because no one likes the word selling, but you're always selling to the next level, and you're selling to the end product. Like, how are you shaping? These children, obviously people are trusting you with their children, right? That's really important. So what we're saying is, like, how do you tell these parents, like, oh my gosh, look what's coming next year. Oh my goodness, look what the end, like what's coming after, when your child graduates and they're on to, or like graduates, whatever level your school ends at, this is amazing. And that gives parents, like, first of all, a sense of like fear of missing out, right? they're like, oh my gosh, these amazing things are coming. I want my child here. This is a place for them, right? And it's also just really making sure that parents are educated and aware of the unique value that your school is offering at each level.
Yeah, because you got to make the decision over and over again to stay enrolled with the school. So just because you've got them once, and maybe that's a little bit different when somebody's moving to a different community and they're going to the public school, maybe that's a little different. So I loved all your content ideas. So understanding your value, what sets you apart, and you're telling those stories, storytelling, emotional, People remember stories, Aubrey. So those are the things that really, stand out. And all of it is kind of those, well, like you talk a lot about social proof, but those positive deposits that you need to be making every day, because something bad is going to happen at your school, right? There's going to be some challenge. You've got to have all those positive deposits out there so that it'll help when something goes wrong, right?
Absolutely. I love that you say that, because I talk about that all the time. I'm like, look, it's not if something negative is going to happen to a family. It's when. When are they? Are they going to be stuck in a line? Their child's going to be put on the wrong bus home. I mean, things happen. Life happens. Right. You can't control everything. So how are you really putting, as you mentioned, the positive deposits in there so that it's negating some of that?
Yeah. And then those classroom happenings, that's what I see sometimes missing. Like those are the easy things that just need to be told, that people need to be able to see, and that can do so much to keep people connected, especially in the last couple of years, right, Aubrey, where people weren't allowed in the schools. And in some cases the kids weren't there either, but bringing that back and letting people see what they're learning, what they're experiencing. I think that is really important. And that's a big one that I see when, we obviously work with hundreds of schools. When we go in, it's like, okay, where are the pictures of the kids like in the classroom? And, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the heart of the school. It is
Right.
really the heart of the school. I mean, children, we wouldn't have schools if there weren't children in them. So
Right.
we need to show what the children are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I want to go over, so we talked about content, which is usually a big struggle. The other struggle is time. So what kind of time strategies do you have, and getting enough content for, all your content ideas? What are some strategies for time savings that you could share?
Well, I did mention batching, and I did mention setting aside time each week and not letting that time each week and each month and each year, not letting that time be negotiated away, because a lot of people will set these meetings with themselves and then, oh, Jenny from down the hall wants to meet now, so I'm going to cancel out all my time I was planning to work on, batching this social media and planning and stuff like that, and I'm going to go to that meeting instead. So honoring that time, I think, is really important. And then there's systems. I think that's one of the biggest issues that I see across the board for all schools, is like, how are you getting the content to you, right? And I think this is really important. And what sort of system do you have for receiving content? Like, let's say, the athletic team wants you to post something. Well, do you tell them like when your posting days are, or when you're scheduling posts? Like, do you tell them, like, do you have a set deadline? Are you just willy-nilly accepting things left and right, right? Coming up with those systems that makes your life easier, and sets the boundaries for others is really important. And then content feed coming to you, like, how are faculty and staff giving you the content? In an ideal world, we'd be in every classroom taking pictures and writing stories, but that is not feasible. It is not. You can't be everywhere at once. So how are you setting up the systems to get the content from faculty and staff?
Yeah. And we teach that a lot within our membership group. And, obviously we do social media for about 90 school districts across the country. We have an email address set up because I think, same with some of that sanity saving. It's like, okay, if it comes to my time of the week where I've got to, schedule out some posts, if I've got DMs and text messages and emails to my email address and then email to the one that I actually set up, and I'm going to miss something, and I'm going to, it's really overwhelming. So whatever you choose to do, you got to really stick with it. And it's a boundary thing that I think ultimately helps, right?
Absolutely. And I love that you teach that in your program, because I think setting those boundaries is sometimes the most difficult thing for people to do. They're used to just saying, sure, okay, I'll take that. Or yeah, you can DM it to me or email it to me, or, 5 different other routes.
By a carrier pigeon or whatever. And you think you're being like, you just want the content, but it's like, no, I mean, it's gotta be manageable. You talked about that. What's sustainable, what's consistent. So you really need to analyze that all. So I loved it. Batching, set aside time, the systems. And the truth is you can't do it all yourself. And so a lot of these folks in your small independent schools are wearing multiple hats. A lot of times in public schools, I mean, hopefully they have a communication role, but a lot of schools don't. So it's a secretary, it's a principal, it's a media specialist, it's a teacher that just loves social media and wants to do a great job for the school, but you can't be at every event in every classroom. So you have to build that army of storytellers.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. And I mean, kudos to everyone out there who is doing that role, because it is a tough role and you're wearing many hats, and, you know, it's not easy. So this boundary setting and these systems will really pay off in the long run.
Yeah. And I know that's what you help these small schools do. So what are some of the best stories that you've seen shared on us, you know, from a school on social media? I know you talked some examples of what really does well, but could you kind of describe 2 or 3 really good stories, or, you know, testimonial things that you put together, or something that could really inspire us, especially because it's mid-July. A lot of us are thinking about 22-23 school year, how to do a better job. So can you share?
Absolutely. So we conduct market research a lot, and that means we interview like current parents, new parents of schools, and we try to find out, okay, like, why did you choose to enroll? Like, that's one of the questions we ask, and it's so intriguing. And this is what gives me goosebumps, because people will get very emotional. They'll be like, we stalked the social media page for like months before we were coming to the school, right? And they're like, and we were so incredibly connected with how that school presented. Like, I'm getting like teary-eyed just thinking it. Like, they were so passionate. Like, we saw the children outside, we saw them doing this really cool science experience, and we said, that's what we want for our child. Like, those like things that we, you know, those emotional like pieces, and showcasing the classroom and really identifying their key values and making sure they're present has a huge impact. So it's really, I think, about understanding that people will connect with what you're putting out there. If it's like emotionally driven, and if it's like a story, if it's showcasing what's happening in the classroom, people are looking, people are watching, and it's impacting them. So I would say it's more that the impact, your social media has huge impact. And hearing from those parents where they would sit there and say, you know, I can imagine my child there. I'm so excited. And the current parents are saying, wow, look at what the next level is doing. You know, I just saw them doing this really cool thing. Or when the graduations come along and they hear about like the impact that the schools had on these graduates' lives and stuff like that. I think those like transformational pieces, as well as the storytelling, are really, really things that I've seen have some of the highest impact on both current and prospective families.
And I think there's a lot of hints in your past posts where you can go through and look at, okay, what had the most engagement, the likes, the comments, the shares, because those then end up reaching the most people. Take a look at this last school year and look what kind of content reached the most, and then try to do more of that. So sometimes you have to be intentional to go out and look for those. But in one of my, I do challenges a couple times a year. And one of them was go out and find like that underdog story that, you know, and oh my gosh, the stories that people shared with, one gal was learning to read music in Braille. She was a blind student. And so that was a super cool story. One was like a team manager that got like captain for the game or whatever, and they shared a picture of that. We even had a little story of a girl that lost her arm in an accident, and she was only like in kindergarten, and she had a prosthetic, but she was very embarrassed to wear it. She named it Ariel. And then finally, with the encouragement of her, you know, classmates and her teacher, she decided to wear it, and they had a picture, and she was beaming, and all the kids were so supportive. And so it's like, that's where me as a mom, that's where I get the goosebumps, right, Aubrey, where it's just like, I want my kids to go to a school like that, where they are encouraging the students to, you know, push beyond what they imagined, and they're encouraged by other people, you know, their classmates. Those stories exist. Those students exist, student stories exist, those staff members that are doing amazing things. those exist, but sometimes you have to go looking for them a little bit.
I love that. I got chills just hearing you talk about that. Cause those, I mean, I got a little teary eyed when you're talking about that girl, because I'm like, yes, like who doesn't want a supportive, caring environment where, you know, her peers are rallying around her and she has that, you know, wonderful experience. So I thank you for bringing that up. That's so important.
Yeah. So as we close out, what's your best, we talked about a ton about social media. I love this and we could talk all day, but what would you say would be your best social media tip?
I'm probably going to be repetitive, but my best tip is really set up the systems and the boundaries and the expectations. Know your strategy, know what your goals are, and set the systems up to help you actually get your job done without burning out.
Yeah. And now is a great time to be able to do that. I would also say one of the best tips for social media is to stay connected and, you know, learning from what other folks are doing. And I know there at Easy School Marketing, you have a lot of content and a lot of ways that you help schools. So how can we best stay connected to you? And then I think you have an upcoming event in August that we wanted to get listeners invited to.
Yes, thank you so much. So you can find me at easyschoolmarketing.com or on LinkedIn with Aubrey Bursch. I'd love to connect with you, but I'd also love to invite you to, we do a free virtual meetup every month called Small School Leaders. Our next one's on August 25th. We'd love for you to attend. We discuss all the challenges people are facing. Usually it's around time and resources. So if you can relate, then that's for you. We also have the Mindful School Marketing podcast. So if you're listening to this, you're probably a podcast person. So we invite you to jump on over there and listen to some of our marketing podcasts as well.
Yes. And that's where I met Aubrey first, was through that podcast. So we're going to give a link to Aubrey's website, and that's where you'll be able to find that free virtual meetup that's happening August 25th. We'll also link to your podcast, your LinkedIn, and directly, like I said, to your website. I really applaud you, Aubrey, for all of the work that you're doing, especially for focusing on these small schools that need your help. It's hard work, right? Like you can tell that you're so committed and so passionate. Now, if folks are interested in, hey, like we feel like we could use Aubrey's help in setting up these systems, and is that kind of the work that you do when you partner with a school and help them?
Absolutely. We call it foundational, like our foundational method, where we kind of do an audit of what you're doing. And then we figure out, okay, what's working? What's the return on investment? And then how can we make your life easier using the resources you currently have? So we do that. And we also do market research for schools who want to really know, like, what are my parents thinking? Like, why did they enroll? Why are they still here? Because that also helps with messaging for marketing as well.
Okay. And you focus all of that work on independent schools. You don't really serve public schools. No. Okay.
All independent.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that's pretty much, that's what I've found. You know, I mainly do the social media management for public schools because they're different. And it's just, you know, our system is just the way that we partner with schools. It just makes more sense. There are some nuances in independent schools. So if you're in the market for market research, if you're an independent school, or that you need some of those foundational pieces, please reach out to Aubrey. She is the best in the business. And you also do some speaking for some independent school conferences and things like that. So if any of you are on the lookout, they could get with you for that, right?
Absolutely. They could. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me, Aubrey. This has been really helpful. So much tangible, like hands-on, content that's going to be able to help folks, especially as they kind of get refreshed for this new school year. Thanks for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me on. And I'd also like to thank all your wonderful school leaders out there for the amazing jobs that they're doing in their schools every day.
Yeah, it's important because us as parents, right, we want to be able to see what's happening. And so great work, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. And we will see you next week with another great guest on our podcast. And don't forget, if you've got extra time, a little extra time this summer, you can always binge watch some episodes or listen to some of our podcast episodes. And then make sure that you head over to the Mindful School Marketing podcast as well to learn some more from Aubrey. So we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Bye, Aubrey.
Bye.